Imagine spending a decade building something so powerful, so airtight, so commercially bulletproof that even the people who compete against you privately admit they can't touch it. Now imagine watching it dissolve in 30 days. Not because you lost, not because you fell apart, not because you did anything wrong, but because the world simply decided it was time to fall in love with someone else. That is the story of Eala Sabalenka. Music. And if you think this is just a tennis story, you haven't been paying attention. For 3 straight years, Sabalenka didn't just play tennis. She owned it. The Ukrainian powerhouse had built something that went far beyond rankings and trophies. She was a phenomenon. Every time she stepped onto the court, the atmosphere changed. There was this electricity, this sense of inevitability. Her forehand alone could silence a stadium. Music. Her serve could break a player's spirit before the rally even started. She was relentless in a way that made other elite athletes look ordinary by comparison. Losses were rare. Dominance was the default. And the world of professional tennis had quietly accepted that this was just how things were going to be for the foreseeable future. Nobody challenged that. Music. Nobody even tried. But here's the thing about Sabalenka that most casual observers missed. The trophies were almost secondary. What she'd built off the court was the real empire. Music. By 2024 and into early 2025, Sabalenka had become the most commercially dominant force in women's tennis. Full stop. Luxury brands weren't just interested in her, they were competing for her. Gucci came calling. Emirates signed on. Nike was in the picture. These weren't small side deals or regional partnerships. We're talking foundational 8-figure commitments from companies that don't gamble with their brand image. These corporations looked at the landscape of women's tennis and made a very deliberate calculation. Sabalenka was the safest bet, the highest return, the clearest choice. Her matches drew millions of viewers. Her social media presence was enormous. Her image appeared on billboards across continents. She was being positioned as the epitome of power and elegance, a rare combination that luxury brands spend fortunes trying to find in an athlete. Music. They found it in her. By early 2025, financial analysts who track athlete earnings were estimating her annual sponsorship income somewhere between $40 and $50 million. And that was before you factored in prize money, appearance music fees, and investment returns. Her contracts included 7-figure bonuses tied to Grand Slam victories. She had performance multipliers built into her deals. She had appearance guarantees regardless of results. The machine was running perfectly. Her financial advisors were talking about her in terms usually reserved for athletes who are on a trajectory toward becoming billionaires. The Sabalenka brand wasn't just strong. It felt permanent, untouchable, like something you'd need a catastrophic sustained collapse to even dent. Music. Nobody was predicting a catastrophe. Nobody even had the language for what was about to happen. And Alex, music, a 20-year-old from Manila, Philippines. At the start of 2025, if you weren't deeply embedded in the world of women's tennis, you probably hadn't heard her name. She wasn't ranked in the top 10. She wasn't featured in the major brand campaigns. She wasn't getting the primetime broadcast slots or the high-profile press opportunities. She was just another talented young player trying to carve out space in a sport absolutely stacked with talented young players. Music. Nobody had put money on her yet. At least not the kind of money that changes careers. But then Miami happened. Her run through that tournament wasn't supposed to go the way it did. She knocked out a top 20 player, then another one. Then the upsets kept coming, and what had started as an interesting storyline became something the tennis world genuinely couldn't stop talking about. People who'd never watched a women's tennis match in their lives were suddenly clicking on her highlights. Because it wasn't just that she was winning, it was how she was winning. And more importantly, it was who she was while she was doing it. A young woman from a developing nation, humble background, no corporate machine behind her, no dynasty propping her up, just raw talent, and an almost reckless hunger to prove herself against people who had every structural advantage over her. The underdog narrative wrote itself, and the world ate it up completely. Social media responded the way it only does when something genuinely captures the collective imagination. TikTok, music, Instagram, Alex content was everywhere and not the manufactured brand-managed kind of everywhere. This was organic. People were genuinely invested in her. They were watching her matches not just as sports, but as chapters in a story they desperately wanted to have a happy ending. She represented something different than what Sabalenka offered. Where Sabalenka was the force of nature you admired from a distance, music, Alex was the person you rooted for at 3 o'clock in the morning when you should have gone to sleep an hour ago. Music, she made people feel something. And in the modern sports marketing landscape, that distinction is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The sponsorship inquiries started quietly. Nike's team was paying attention. Babat saw the numbers. Globe Telecom in the Philippines had an obvious national interest and moved quickly. But then something interesting happened. It stopped being just regional enthusiasm. Music, international brands started running her marketability metrics. And what they found was genuinely startling. Her engagement rates weren't just good. They were outperforming athletes with significantly larger followings. Her demographic reach was broad in the exact way brands are willing to pay a premium for. She was resonating with younger audiences, with international audiences, with people who weren't traditional tennis fans. She was becoming a global figure, and she was doing it in real time with the world watching. Here's the language that actually matters in the rooms where these decisions get made. Sabalenka was what sponsors call a proven asset. Predictable returns, guaranteed visibility, established audience. Those are good things. That's a solid investment. But Alex was something else entirely. She was an exponential growth opportunity. Every match she played, her stock climbed. Every interview she gave, she became more relatable, more compelling, more human. Every sponsored post performed better than the one before it because millions of people were emotionally invested in her trajectory. They weren't just watching her, they were hoping for her. And hope, as any marketing executive will tell you, behind closed doors, is the most powerful currency in the entire business. The momentum shifted gradually at first, then all at once. Music, Gucci issued a statement in March of 2025. The language was careful, corporate, music, diplomatically worded, but the translation was devastatingly simple. They wanted Alex's image alongside their luxury brand. They were restructuring the Sabalenka partnership, which in sponsorship terms is the polite way of saying they were walking away. Then Emirates followed. The airline had announced what seemed like a landmark long-term partnership with Sabalenka not that long before. Now their internal marketing data was telling them something uncomfortable. Younger demographics weren't engaging with Sabalenka content the way they used to. They were engaging with Alex. Music. And in a business where relevance to younger consumers determines the entire future of a brand, that data isn't something you can argue with. Then Nike made it official. A global partnership with Alex, $15 million. Music. A deal that publicly, loudly, unmistakably said, "This is who we believe in now. This is the face of the future." That announcement landed like a bomb in the tennis world. Because it wasn't just a contract. It was a declaration. And within 72 hours of that declaration, 3 more major sponsors signaled their intentions to either terminate or significantly renegotiate their agreements with Sabalenka downward. The financial damage was happening in real time, and it was moving faster than anyone on her team had the ability to respond to. What had been a $300 million sponsorship empire was hemorrhaging value by the day. Her agents were scrambling. Her team was in crisis mode. But the brutal truth of sponsorship momentum is this. Music. Once brands see the tide turning, they don't wait, they move. Loyalty in that world is a story sponsors tell themselves during good times. When the data shifts, the contracts get reconsidered and the narrative changes permanently. There's no loyalty to an athlete when there's a better story available. It's not personal. And the math had stopped working in Sabalenka's favor. The sports media had a field day. Tennis journalists wrote long think pieces about generational shifts. Commentators debated whether Sabalenka's dominance on the court was being rendered commercially irrelevant by the rise of social media influence as its own currency. Was she too cold, too predictable? Had her playing style become too machine-like for audiences who wanted human stories? Music. The question stung, not because they were necessarily fair, but because they were being asked at all. She'd won everything. Music. She'd delivered everything sponsors asked for. And now she was being analyzed as a commercial liability. The silence that followed that initial wave of departures was its own kind of brutal. Where once there had been a constant flow of partnership opportunities, appearances, brand music events, invitations, there was now a quiet that felt nothing like peace. Her phone rang less. The emails from agents became more anxious. The machinery that had surrounded her at the height of her commercial dominance had simply stopped generating new opportunities. She was still winning matches. She was still world number one. But the money had moved on. The brands had chosen. And in the era of social media sports marketing, that choice matters in ways that can't be undone by winning a Grand Slam. The psychological dimension of this story is the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Sabalenka had built her entire identity around being the dominant force. That identity extended beyond the court. She dominated negotiations. She dominated the marketplace. She was used to being the one other people measured themselves against. Now she was in unfamiliar territory, watching someone 20 years old dismantle the commercial structure she'd spent years constructing. Not through sabotage or strategy, but simply by being a more compelling story at the right moment. That's the kind of loss that hits differently than any match defeat ever could. She gave interviews. She defended her brand and her record. Heard yet, and everything you built can shift in a single month. Music. That's the world Sabalenka lives in now. That's the world every athlete lives in. Music. And honestly, none of us should be surprised.